Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Churchill Club CEO, Karenann Tucker.
Thank you very much. Good evening. I'm Karenann Tucker, CEO at the Churchill Club. Welcome to our program called CIO Agenda 2013. I would like to start by welcoming our distinguished group of CIOs, Karen Austin from PG&E, Ben Freed, Google, Bask Iyer from Juniper, and Karenann Terrell from Wal-Mart stores, and of course our moderator Steve Hill from Kpmg. It's certainly an exciting time to be a CIO with the disruptive technologies such as mobility and social media, big data, and cloud are repositioning IT from a support function to more of a strategic role with the potential to transform businesses. And tonight we will find out what's top of mind for this remarkable set of CIOs as they look toward 2013 and beyond. Our thanks goes to Kpmg, especially Keith Mattioli and Tim Zaney, for their support in making this program possible. Please join me in thanking them. It's great to see such an amazing audience in the room for this program. It looks a bit like a who's who in Silicon Valley. There are also people here from across the country and around the globe. And I just want to give you a friendly reminder that you are the reason that we're doing this program. If there are some topics that don't get brought up in the discussion, there will be a Q&A. That's approximately the last 30 minutes of the program, and you can raise your hand and ask for that microphone and bring up your topic. Our next program is Thursday evening, July 26th, called Unlocking Social Technologies. And this event is presented with McKinsey Global Institute on the occasion of the launch of their new study that shows enormous untapped value creation across both the enterprise and consumer landscape relative to social technologies. And the evening of July 31, we present the Chief Marketing Officer Agenda 2013 with CMOs from DreamWorks Animation, Google, Intuit, and SAP. And I encourage all of you to attend if you can. It makes a great double header together with our program this evening. That event is in Santa Clara. The evening of August 20, we'll present a program about the future of conversing with technology with an all-star roundtable, including Steve Wozniak. And that program is here in Palo Alto. And then finally, we have a remarkable set of programs for you on Thursday, September 13. First, a day-long program called Changing the Game. We'll unpack change for you and we'll map the insights into interactive breakaways that tackle megatopics that are ripe for innovation, such as energy, healthcare, education. And that same evening, it's the Churchill Awards. That's a program that inspires others by highlighting excellence in 4 areas that I believe we all care about. One of them is innovation, another is collaboration, another is leadership / mentorship, because good leaders, I think, are good mentors, and also societal benefit. So please come if you can. If you are tweeting tonight, please use the hashtag Churchill Club, and you'll find other Twitter codes in your printed program. Let me now turn this over to our moderator, Steve Hill. Steve is Vice Chairman of Strategic Investments at Kpmg, and what that translates into is that he is the innovation lead at Kpmg. He's also an elected official in his town where he lives, Copper Canyon, Texas. He has a diverse and distinguished background and a true passion for innovation and technology, and I know he put a lot of effort into planning the session tonight. We're certainly honored to have him here. Please welcome Steve Hill.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Good evening, everyone. We'll spend the next 90 minutes, about 55 minutes or so in discussion, then we'll turn it over to the rest of the room to have a lively Q&A on the topic of leaning forward in technology. And I think that there are 2 areas that we'll cover in the context of leaning forward. One is this curve that we're in, the different disruptive technologies, how we're dealing with them, and then how these distinguished speakers are dealing with managing the function in that environment. I can't think of 4 more qualified people to help talk about the different aspects of this kind of lean than the four folks that are up here today. And they will do a much better job than I, giving you a little bit more detail about each of them individually. And I'd like to start with that so that you get a chance to get to know us as a group as we move into this discussion. And with that, Karenann, you want to start off?
Good evening. I'm Karenann Terrell, and I've been at Wal-Mart for about a year and a half. I've been the CIO there since February. I brought a whole table of distinguished technologists actually with me. Our head of mobile is here, our chief technology officer, and head of engineering. So I'm glad to be here.
I'm Bask Iyer. I'm the CIO for Juniper Networks, and I've been here for about a year now, in the Valley, new to the Valley. And prior to that, I was the CIO for Honeywell in East Coast and worked for large companies, J&J, GlaxoSmithKline. So this is a good change, and I like being in the West Coast.
Hi, I'm Ben Freed. I'm Google's CIO. I've held the job for a little over 4 years now. Prior to that, I spent about 14 years working on Wall Street in IT at Morgan Stanley.
Hi, I'm Karen Austin, and I'm the CIO at PG&E. Prior to this, I was CIO at Sears Holdings and CIO at Kmart, so 27 years of retail. And when I got the call for the job at PG&E, I'm like, a utility? Are you kidding? It must be so bureaucratic. But my husband said, it's California, just go on the effing interview. So I did. I love California, and so many opportunities with big data, with smart meter, with mobile. Should be a good discussion.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. Yeah, I mean, obviously, different firms, different backgrounds. It'll be a good conversation, I'm sure. Let's start off with, how we might amalgamate the current curve of adoption, disruptive technologies that are hitting us. When I think about the times that we're in, I think about cloud, big data. You mentioned big data, Karen. Data analytics. The analytics are coupled with the cloud, mobile, and social media turning into social enterprise. I think a lot of those are stalking horses for what effectively is the consumerization of IT. And I think this curve that we're experiencing is a little bit different from other curves we've felt before. And in some of the forum discussions with the panelists, there was some interesting back and forth on how we would describe that curve. Bask, what are some of your thoughts on how is today's, when you lean into 2013, how is the next 12 to 18 months different from the kinds of cycles we've seen in prior adoption curves of technology?
I wonder if this time what we are experiencing is the change is happening faster, and it's faster and faster and faster, and we are at a stage of a tremendous amount of change happening at the same time. So something I wonder historically looking and saying, yeah, we've always handled change, but this time it's happening fast and very fast, and a lot of convergence. The second thing is a lot of people are seriously putting their thoughts. It was unlike perhaps 10 years ago. It is not just startups. There are startups, there are big companies, they're all converging on these big trends, whether it's cloud or social, whatever. So there's a lot more, I see a lot more energy this time around. And you can fail fast. I mean, you don't have to do a 10-year implementation of something to know if it works or not. You can try something and fail fast and move on, which is refreshing. So it makes you a little bolder to try a few things that I would have hesitated, a few years ago.
Karenann, what about standardization in this curve? What are your thoughts around maybe it's the lack of standardization as these things converge, and Walmart's the largest organization in the world. I mean, that's got to be an awesome
So what a big
task.
company wants more than anything is de facto standards, something that everybody's going to write to. And then when there's a standard platform, a lot of innovation can come out of that based on the individual industry or even at the user level. I think the interesting thing about social and mobile is there isn't a de facto standard that develops. There's, from a mobile point of view, there are multiple platforms to write to. There's going to be multiple winners. It isn't going to come down to a standard platform. There's multiple hardware as well as operating system areas in mobile. Social, we can call the a Facebook today's winner, but what's going to happen in a social environment. And I think in an environment like that where nothing is really stabilizing, the last big change that we saw being the internet was pretty stable, pretty standard, the way things would be developed. There was a lot of innovation. I think there's still a lot of innovation on the platforms themselves. And I think that's going to change an awful lot the speed at which things will move in terms of innovation. That's my perspective, at least on mobile.
How about cloud? Ben, what about cloud in this context?
How about that cloud?
Yeah, how about that cloud?
How about that cloud? I think actually the important thing to do, I'm sorry, I'm going to answer your question by answering a different question, is to step back a little bit. And I think that all the things we are talking about are side effects of the fact that the technology industry has permanently changed and that the single greatest driving force in the technology industry is going to be technology for consumers, right? And I think that I read a little Plato in college, and there's this parable of the cave, right, where the part of the story is that reality is just people looking at shadows cast on the wall of a cave by people playing with puppets before a fire. And I think that looking at mobile or social or cloud is actually looking at shadows cast on the wall of the cave, shadows cast by the fact that the consumer is now driving IT. And I, for one, grew up in an era where the enterprise drove IT and the consumer benefited from it. And I think that the thing we all need to do as IT leaders and in this industry is understand what is the real role of enterprise technology going to be, where will enterprises still drive, where do we really need to radically rethink the processes and the role of IT, because the best technology in the world is no longer going to be provided by great vendors who come to us with a pad and paper to listen to what our problems are. That's not how social arose, that's not how mobile, that's not how smartphones arose, that's not how cloud arose. And the question is how we adapt and use all those things is, I think, the bigger issue that we all need to adapt to. And we're still in the painful adolescence of all that at best, right? I honestly don't know what kind of advice to give my former colleagues in financial services about how they map their compliance regimes and so on onto a world where technology is driven by the consumer first.
And are the organizations that you work with, your organization's position to deal with that shift? I think it's pretty profound.
So, I mean, one of the reasons that, not to over-personalize, but one of the reasons that I went to Google was because it looked from the outside, knowing very little that I did, like this consumerization was going to be an enormous, bellwether trend, and I thought I'd rather kind of get on the inside and see what steering I could do from the inside than the pleading I could do from the outside as this stuff happens. So, I mean, I think there's, I'm not sure, does that answer your question in itself?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I think it does. There's work to be done.
I think there is work to be done. It is very, very early days.
Yeah.
I think none of us as CIOs, as enterprises, as consumer technology companies catering to enterprises really know what the playbook is going to look like. The traditional enterprise playbook is pretty well baked, but this one is not.
Karenann, PG&E, it's a different kind of organization in terms of maybe how technology is brought to the table. Do you consider it to be a top-down action to the point of consumerization, or do you find a lot of the ideas, you guys are doing massive things with data. I mean, 9 million meters, and there's just a ton of things that you're doing. Do you see that coming top-down, or do you see it coming from, like we talked about, consumers back in? How does that phenomenon work in your organization?
I think it's coming from everywhere, but it's definitely a collaboration with our business partners. We are upgrading the infrastructure. As everyone across the world, and certainly in the US, the pipes and the wires are old, and what was once modern now needs to be severely upgraded. And that upgrade isn't just putting new physical pipes in the ground or wires, it's putting technology integrated as part of all of that, like FLISR schemes, which are fault location, isolation, and service restorations that allow us to detect when there's a fault and then rewire the circuit. And the number of customers impacted decreases like by 77%, and you're out for 2 minutes instead of several hours. Those type of things make every initiative very technology-oriented. We just had our 3-year strategy review, and I think every other word out of the mouth was technology, technology. So it's moving rapidly.
So businesses starting to get it.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, it's not, And I think that leads to a conversation we can have a little bit later, which is the evolving roles of the organization, not just in IT, but in the CFO suite or the chief marketing officer suite, et cetera, et cetera. Before we get much further in this topic, I really kind of wanted to hit, and maybe all four of y'all can answer this question, of as you lean into 2013, the implications of these disruptive technologies and the things, the initiatives you're working, what's your strategy overall for the function? Where are you headed? Do you see spend going up? Do you see it going down? Do you see it staying the same? You're doing more with less? You're going to do more with more? How does it feel for you all? Who wants to go first? Bask?
I could. I think if you do the same thing you did last year, your spend is going down. So clearly it is going down. You have to do what you did last year 10 times better this year. The trend is forever down. I mean, all of us have been in IT, and if you're doing the same thing for 20 years, whether the recession or not, your spend has to go down. You deliver more for the money. And thank God for some of the companies here and there that we were able to deliver that value. But if you show value, I don't need to do a budget. If you show value on how you can use social engineering to reach consumers or customers, I don't need a budget. There's money. You directly tie it to a P&L. If there's a value to show how analytics can save or reach customers. So there's traditional budgeting process, which will go down, I would think. And then if you opportunistically look and say, I think I can bring some revenue to you. It's going to cost you $1 million. I can give you $30 million back. I don't think any CFO is going to say, we don't have money to do that. That always existed, but this time around, you can actually deliver in shorter cycles, which, I don't need to do a 3-year project to do it. And you can experiment quickly and say, give me 100,000, let me see what I can do, and if I fail, okay, screw it up, and move on. So I think there's a traditional budgeting, which you have to plan to come down, and then there is what I think of as this creative or non-traditional budgeting is you selectively look at these opportunities and just marry the pain points, and companies are still spending a lot of money to reach customers and so on, and I don't think they're going to stop.
Do you see the spend, Bask, in Juniper, do you see that spend becoming more distributed? I mean, I think the point you're making is if you're showing value, there's not a question about budget. And I think I get the inference in that is that the impetus, the capital for investment in technology is broadening in a way that we haven't seen.
Sure, I think Ben mentioned consumerization of IT. So traditionally what IT CIOs have done is you buy a big asset, you get it in, you sweat it over 10 years and 9 years and so on. That's how we kind of, that was our tricks. There is no sweating of assets. The assets are sweat by the time you buy them. So you have to have a different playbook now, which is what is the opportunities that you can actually deliver in marketing or sales or somebody else. It is distributed. So the CIOs, I don't measure myself in how much budget I have this year and how many people I have reporting into you. It's how much value you can deliver and how much a part of the business you are. And there's literally unlimited budgets if you have value. And so I mean, that's one way to look at it. I'm learning. I mean, that's, I don't know what you guys think about it, but there's businesses dying to spend money and try these things. And so you have to be a little non-traditional about it.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. Definitely an increase in spend, but pressure to benchmark and improve our efficiencies at the same time. But I see businesses shifting capital from their budgets to IT quite a bit, and even collaborating when they see another line of business that needs something from IT and shifting some of their dollar to that business so that we can serve them. So incredible support.
I think part of the incredible benefit of the consumerization of IT, where everybody's the CIO, I'm sure at Google that's true.
Yes, I get that.
But I believe it's true with the 2.2 million associates at Walmart as well. And what starts to happen is technology becomes the business. There's no longer a support function. It's not about looking at the CIO as an administrative element. And a really, really big driver at Walmart is technologically enabling the business model. Retail essentially is big data. Walmart was big data before big data was cool.
Right.
It was just the very nature of Walmart's data has been huge. And the analytical capabilities, the enablement of the analytical capabilities through anywhere, anytime cloud, being able to access that, there's a lot of money being spent in that space. It's not just at checkout counters. It's in mobile checkout. It's in all of the innovation that's coming in inventory management, customers in stores. So I think that this is the great opportunity in innovation to actually capture share, is make the shopping experience easier. That is the business. So there's going to be a lot more prioritized, great in a few, and good enough in the rest. There's going to be a lot of prioritized spending, but I think it's going to be more.
How do you manage the no's? I mean, the prioritized spending is an interesting topic. You know, in some organizations, it's harder to manage no's than in others.
Yeah, Walmart is an incredibly disciplined organization in knowing what it takes to be the low-cost provider of retail. To be low cost generates low price. So it's a maniacal focus on bringing about the technological investments. There's a lot of nice to haves. That's why that great in a few is really, really, I think it's coming to every business during the downturn. You know what you're really great at and you spend money on. It's always been there at Walmart. It's still there. It will be in the future.
Then what about Google? How about the no's there? And as you lean into 2013, what's your strategy for IT?
So on the one hand, I think in traditional areas of operations, increasing efficiency, and we benchmark ourselves rigorously that costs, times, and so on, efficiency is getting better year on year. We're very, very disciplined about that, and have been for a long time. I would agree in general with certainly Bask's sentiment that if the value is there, the support is there. The perspective that my job inside Google is interesting for a few reasons. I'd say one of them is just we're a young company, right? And it's a young IT department and a young company that's growing, and the company is growing enormously. That's not typical in the American economy. Being a young, 30,000 person or whatever it is company that is also growing and all that, we're very, very lucky. It's a great position to be in. It's not, I wouldn't want to say things about it that generalize out broadly, but I would say absolutely that there's a ton of work that can be done to improve value, to improve efficiency, to kind of give return back to the businesses, to the shareholders, and so on. And we're doing that. I think one of the things about IT at Google that's interesting is that it's really important to us to make the experience of working at Google better, right? And that the idea that technology is about empowering the employee and respecting and empowering the employee drives a lot of what we do, in addition to serving line of business functions with excellence. And that tends to drive us to do things that are somewhat different from other IT departments.
And does that, in your case, does that include fostering innovation and driving innovation, or helping to empower innovation?
I mean, so there's a ton of that. First of all, our goal is to be the premier showcase user of Google's technologies in an enterprise context, and that forces one to wear the innovator hat frequently, which is great. And like I said, that was a motivating factor for me in doing that. So, you can bet if there's a technology Google offers for the enterprise, we've done something meaningful with it, right? And attempted to push the envelope with it, which is fantastic. But there's, innovation is a broad space, right? Google has, as I'm sure a number of my colleagues do here, we have interesting problems in supply chain, for example, that are great opportunities for technology. We have interesting problems in personnel management, right? We hire, I'm sure we don't compare to Wal-Mart, but we hire a lot of people, and we do it in ways that are unusual, and that demands innovation, right? And we take atypical views on a bunch of people processes. We have so many parts of Google operate in an unusual context where there isn't something you can buy to solve it. It creates tons of opportunities for creation and great ideas and partnering with the people who work on Google products.
Bask, what about you?
Well, I think it'll be great if you can marry the efficiency of a Walmart, the back-end supply chain and so on, and the innovation of Walmart, but the innovation of some of the Silicon Valley companies, right? That's the magic to look for. So in our company, if you look at it, we will innovate everything. Innovation is in our DNA. And it's a question of where do you innovate that adds value to the customers, and where do you standardize? You have to go through the discipline. So if you're coming from a traditional companies, when I come here and I look and said, yes, we need to do social, mobile, all the other kind of stuff, but you need to ship products, you need to track shipments, you can't, there's no need to innovate. There are people who have done that before, and you need to put those engines in place. So the traditional things that, like ERP and other kind of stuff, some basics need to be in a company to transform. So you just can't say, let's just go social and not have a system to ship your products. You know what I mean? As crazy as it sounds. So a lot of the transformation we're doing in Juniper is to say, a lot of things are cool, but there are certain things we just need to put it in.
Yeah.
And not worry about how to handle warranties and claims and paying bills and handling employees and payroll and so on. These things are basics other guys have tackled, and we don't want to innovate necessarily on how we pay bills. We just want to pay bills. So I think the CIO has an interesting role of, you want to foster this wild innovation and do all that, but then you also have to be a statesman and a business guy to say, we don't want to innovate here. And I'm sure in Google you have some of that, is we want to change everything.
I think that's a great point, and it ties in with your point as well. Like, what are we going to be great at? What must we innovate at? Where must we be different versus, where is it nice to have and where is it really a waste of time?
Right.
Karenann and Karen, different kinds of companies. When we talk about innovation at Wal-Mart or PG&E, do you find that it is a lonely task to empower innovation, or do you find that the business is behind it, supportive, and helping to drive with you? Do you have that mandate to help empower innovation, and how are you? Your organizations are very large, so there's a lot of potential points of innovation coming back. How do you manage that complexity?
Yeah, I think one of the best kept secrets is about how Walmart does its innovation. Yeah. And obviously you don't get to be $430 billion, because somebody handed it to you. It's in the Valley, we have here in San Bruno over 1,000 technologists. And at Walmart Labs is a focused group that comes together of, we were talking about talent density as a really, really important concept, which is 10 of the best, not 1,000 of the rest. So getting those 10 best together in clusters and groups, whether they're working on mobile or whether they're working on some of the social innovation that's going on. I think innovation has to be focused. It has to have a very clear reason for being. It's not just generic, see what you can do in innovation. And it has to be around what the competitive advantages of the companies are. Interestingly, we just have to ship product type of thing is, for most people, just one of those, just do it on the best practice. At Walmart, that's competitive advantage. When you're shipping, to 200 million customers a week, through your stores and on your online presence, that has to be perfect. That has to be perfect for us. So I think the business is sometimes driving too rapidly towards innovation that maybe the customers aren't ready for, because customer acceptance is a really critical component. We want to make sure that for our customers it's the right type of innovation. We have pilots across the country going on around wireless functionality and capability, and we're finding out exactly what level of innovation those customers expect in a store. It's different than in an Apple store. It's different than in other experiences they may have. So I think it's you got to start with the customer in terms of innovation, and nobody knows our customers any better than our business partners. So I think it's a good marriage.
So the priority at PG&E is safety first. So safe, reliable, and affordable. Keep the lights on and the gas flowing. So any innovation supporting safety is a top priority. One of the things that attracted me is the opportunity for mobilization, because of the 20,000 people that work at PG&E, when I arrived, probably 90% of what they did, especially in the field, was on paper. So opportunity to innovate and leverage mobile technologies, but not just automate the existing process. And sometimes getting the business to collaborate on that has been a challenge, but we've pushed forward on that. On the other side, there's so many technologies like the FLIZR and the sensors, and we have an innovation lab here in the Bay Area, and they're driving quite a bit, which is generating a lot of data for us. The 10 million smart meters that are out there, or near 10 million, that's generating 110 billion hourly reads a year between the gas and electric meters. So the opportunity to not only leverage that to feed the green button, which we talked about, standardization. The good news is when the White House contacted us, the CTO, a year ago, to create a green button so that people could download their energy usage from the smart meter, we quickly gathered the California other utilities and came up with a standard, and now it's across the country, 30 million households. But it's very important when you're innovating to make sure it's not a one size, because now the beauty of it is that Silicon Valley and the rest of the country can create apps to use that 110 billion hourly reads to figure out how our customers can be more efficient.
You guys are certainly a leader in big data. Everybody up here has, in some way, shape, or form, a leader. What do you think is your biggest challenge next year and going forward in really leveraging data as an asset and the analytics challenge of driving business value, maybe target operating model?
Yeah, I mean, part of our
evolution
challenge
of
with the
consequence.
data is where do we store it? And I think you and I discussed the cloud earlier. From a utility perspective is interesting because the rate structure pretty much incents you to focus on capital versus expense. And most of the cloud solutions are expense oriented. So we're looking at other type of cloud solutions, whether it be a community or a hybrid or that type of thing. But how do we solve that so that we can solve some of our data issues and more effectively manage it?
You're in the early cycle of cloud adoption.
Yes.
Ben, what about Google? Data as an asset.
Sounds like a good idea.
You think so?
Yeah, maybe there's a product in there
Next.
somewhere. So
Search?
what can I possibly say? I mean, given
Sounds like a good
I
idea.
mean, all this. I mean, I think everyone here especially has some sense of Google's position on it. Starting with, I mean, so much of the 21st century technology for analyzing big data comes from these problems of serving the world, right? Which we do. I don't really need to say much about that because there are far smarter people at Google than I who've written the papers and done the work. I think the thing that's interesting is looking at utilities and looking at retail. I mean, you guys have been doing big data for 50 years in one form or another, right? And like if you go back to Iverson and APL and so on, and they were out trying to solve data analytics problems for a long, long time. It's actually a rich heritage, and there's an interesting wave of new technology that's come in as a result of problems that companies like mine have. But the fascinating thing is that you all have a tremendous history of data analytics to capitalize on. And new problems, new scale, new opportunities. But fundamentally, I think the interesting thing is studying the fact that they are old problems.
Don't look at me. You're putting me next to Google and Wal-Mart and talk about big data. I'm trying to solve small data right now.
I think that one of the biggest challenges about what we're seeing in big data is actually going to be that bridge between the legacy world that we find ourselves in anyways, because I don't think that we ever thought of the data world that we were in as the small data world. It was much more defined, but I think that bridge between the two is given us a lot of angst because we're deriving a lot of value out of that old world. And how do you add really discernibly different value propositions as you move into a different paradigm of data, of unstructured, of video, and you put those things together. So I think that gives us some level of angst. And the other, frankly, difficult issue to solve is the number of people that actually understand the real power of how to put together data assets in a way that you're building something for the future, kind of see that long vision and do the short, is in very short supply. Many of them are right here within 50 miles of where we are, and trying to find data scientists who can really And I'm not talking about the mathematician PhD whiz-bangs from MIT. I'm actually talking about the core fundamental infrastructure of data and how to bring that together, how to put platforms together. It proves a very, very large challenge because everybody in the world is trying to do it at a company level. And everybody in the world seems like they're trying to do it as a business model. I've talked to a couple of venture capitalists today about this exact thing, and I thought, wow, there's a couple founders there I'd like to talk to come to work as data scientists at Walmart. So I think it's a new emerging area that got hot fast, very fast.
I think the only difference is, on previous jobs, I had the secret sauce on how to set up the high-performance computing cluster, hired the mathematicians, had the business analytics, had the software and the intellectual power to do big data analytics. Now you can rent that.
Right.
So the emerging dangerous companies who can look at my data and tell me more than I know, not perhaps like these two, but there are several companies who are not nearly as sophisticated. So you can rent the high-performance cluster, you can rent this software, and people can look and tell you that stuff. That is what is exciting. Is I always like the little person taking on a big giant. So here's an opportunity that somebody, without a lot of infrastructure and power can take on some of the big guys. Scary, and that's very exciting. Right?
Let's shift gears to managing the function, if we can. I spent a lot of time with directors, particularly audit committee chairs. And a comment that I have heard, particularly in the last couple of months, last 6 months or so, about the next year, 2013 and beyond, around it, and how they see their job, their responsibilities shifting and evolving, and the people in the organization that they believe that they need to be in contact with more often than they have in the past, is the CIO. And we've done some empirical analyses around this where we've surveyed them, and it's almost 2 to 1. The CIO is the number one person that they want to start to get to know and understand better. Do you all see, again, very different organizations, maturity, size, complexity. Do you see the leaders in the organization you're working with, right? You can call them your users, your collaborators, however you want to position them. Do you see that model evolving? Because I hear from the director side of it that they want it to evolve. They want you to be more involved with them. And by the way, there's a lot of fear, I think, in some of the circles around privacy and data security and integrity. What are your thoughts on and how you're managing and how you intend in the next year and a half or so to manage the dynamics of that changing relationship with your constituents? Karen?
I bet the number one agenda item with the audit and the board for a CIO is cybersecurity also, as many times as I've had to give an update just today, as a matter of fact. So there's definitely a concern about that and a very big focus on it. As far as the business involvement, I definitely see it engaging. I think they better understand IT and what it can do for them. One of my biggest concerns is the amount of change that we're driving is the sheer change management. And one thing that we have shifted is rather than change management sitting in HR, it's now sitting in IT, who has more of a vested interest in the projects than IT, because we work with the entire company. And I always say 50% of the project is IT, and our job is really hard, but 50% is really change management. So really working with them and partnering with them and making sure they understand their involvement through the entire process is really important.
Other perspectives?
It's to be controversial. You got to put some CIOs on the audit committee on the board. I can't spend 25 years of what I learned and summarize in 2 sentences on how risky it is as a company, how you protect, and that's what audit committees are asking all the time. That's right. Cybersecurity and so on. So I think we have to face up. We don't have a lot of experienced IT professionals. Some of them think they do, but it's not. So it's a hole that I think in 5 years it's going to be exposed considerably, and you're going to see pretty much like a CFO is a default on an audit committee at an external audit board. you're going to find as your information security and the value of information goes up, that's the next evolution that's going to happen. The other thing to be, again, controversial is some of the traditional companies have figured out that the strategic, like the Honeywells and other guys have figured out that the role of a CIO is a strategic. It's not just a technology, whatever. What I find coming to the West Coast is we are still learning from a structure standpoint because all of us believe we know technology. All of us believe we know everything about what's going on. And well, I'm not that smart. It's taken me 25 years to learn. So somebody can learn it in 2 years, but you have to at least spend 2 years in the profession to learn. So, I mean, I think that's just the perspective that you would see in 5 years. In sort of updates, you will have actually people who are knowledgeable and who ask the right questions and talk to the other CIOs and their team members and so on.
I think you're dead on. I mean, the comment you just made is exactly what I'm hearing. By the way, the audit committee is one committee of many that help drive a board agenda. At the end of the day, they say that they want more technology-savvy business leaders on the board. And I think your point about, technology isn't anything but really a business conversation. And any real business conversation they're going to have of substance is going to be technologically enabled. So I think your point's probably less controversial, interestingly, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if, because I think you'd struggle to find any audit committee that has board members exclusively not knowing anything about technology, because CEOs can't persist, and Fortune 100s have CEOs on their boards. They may not have that as their primary portfolio, but they certainly understand technology-enabled business. And to be controversial, a CIO's job 99% of the time when interfacing with the business, unless you're working in a technology company, is doing simultaneous translation between what you're thinking in your brain, they should already know, and coming out of your mouth what they have, something that they can understand. And I don't think it's any different with the audit committee. Because we have to use our sound judgment on what they need to know about risk. Because I think boards, whether they have innovation committees, whether they have, Walmart has a technology and e-commerce subcommittee, they already are tuned into how technology enables the business. And the audit side of things is how technology can disable their business on the risk side. And it is up to us to net it out for them.
I'm afraid to ask.
No, I mean,
I want to hear.
I mean, I'd say this is kind of motherhood and apple pie. It's hard to disagree, I think, with anything I've heard. I think that it's all true, right? So, interconnected systems, security risk. I mean, like at Google, security is not part of IT. It's a separate function, and the person who runs security is a peer of mine, right? So when you consider the business that we're in and what we do, I think that makes a lot of sense. But I mean, he and I spend an enormous amount of time together and work together on a lot of things. And a well-informed board is incredibly important, and making sure that boards understand how to be well-informed, that audit committees get solid advice is good. And Karenann, I've definitely, from experience in other industries as well, I do think that, I mean, I deeply believe in security and the role of security. I deeply believe that the security bar needs to be raised in the industry. That said, I've seen people take advantage of fear-mongering. I've seen security professionals use fear-mongering to drive, empire building and projects and conversations with the board that were, not at Google, but I've seen it happen in other companies.
Sure, not at Morgan Stanley either.
And no customers.
Upon advice of counsel. Anyway, and so I do agree with you that the CIO. Yeah, well, I think I dug a hole and then I fell into it. So, but I mean, I think that the CIO does have an obligation to how to balance transparency, right, with your own personal opinion and assessment in those conversations is incredibly important.
Yeah, I agree.
What about sourcing? I mean, a lot of the people in the audience probably wonder about that phenomena going forward next year and the following year. The outsourcing world is changing, and I think that the kinds of services that can be sourced outside of the organization are dramatically increasing. the economics associated with your destination and your arbitrage opportunity is changing. And there have been some relatively recent, pretty prominent announcements by large organizations that they're bringing stuff back in-house. And I think one of the drivers that they cited in terms of bringing it back in-house was that the innovation was being stifled as a consequence of some of that outsourced function that was no longer managed by their their culture or their control. It was just a cost discussion. How do you see that world changing for your organizations? And do you see the sourcing? Do you see going out for more, for third parties for more things? Do you see bringing things in house? How does that factor into your plans?
I would say at PG&E we definitely leverage third parties just for the sheer amount of work that we need to accomplish. From the offshore perspective, that's a bit more of a challenge because we are a regulated utility, and keeping jobs in California is a really big deal, so I'll pass on that one.
Okay, I'm an alcoholic, so you have to start, if you're a recovering alcoholic, you have to say I'm Bask, I'm an alcoholic. So here I've gone through a change of opinion on this one. I've been, if you look at my background, a lot of emerging technologies, a lot of offshoring, a lot of outsourcing, and we save a ton of money in the companies I work doing it. It's the right thing to do, and so on. So having worked in Silicon Valley, though, I mean, there is something magical about Silicon Valley. I still don't know. I've read all the books. I've talked to all of you. I'm still not convinced anybody knows what it is. I think it's the water. You come and drink the water and you become brilliant. So that's my theory, like pasta. So I think what I notice is innovation is created, you can create a lot of value by 2 or 3 people. So if you just play the labor arbitrage game, you are really demeaning innovation. And people have tried to create Silicon Valley everywhere. It hasn't happened, really. I mean, there are a few pockets you can show, but we've tried on other companies to try. Everybody wants to say, we need a Silicon Valley in this location. Well, we haven't been able to do it. So there's something special about here, and 2 or 3 people are creating the value that thousands of people can't elsewhere. So I think you have to look at bringing certain things in. Then there's still commodity work, and there are certain things that you can put in the cloud or outsource or offshore. You can do several things with that. I think company has to look cleverly at what makes best for shareholder value. But I've come a full circle and say, you just can't do labor arbitrage.
Well, and even if you were still hot on labor arbitrage, it's disappearing in a lot of these geographies anyways. You know what, I think sourcing and what has happened over the years, the phase where we find ourselves today in the phase is that if you need talent, you're in a war for talent. I was talking to a young group of interns this morning in Bentonville, Arkansas, that there are 10 jobs for every one of them. And at least 2 of you on the table or on the panel here are chasing our interns. Well, at least 1. Not you, Ben. But because it's a war for talent. And the supply is low and the demand is high, and you have got to go find talent wherever it is. I don't think that it is a matter of outsourcing. It is a matter of being global businesses and going to the place where talent is. And a lot of the pressures that you're seeing of big companies saying we're going to insource all of our work, which is outsourced, is just going to put more pressure on 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 or 6,000 more IT people. We're just not minting them coming out of schools. I mean, we're just not doing it. We're not, we're just not putting kids into school, and they're not matriculating out with engineering, mathematics, science, and technology degrees in this country.
I think we all know about the crisis in computer science and engineering education in this country not meeting demand. But to speak for the IT strategy only at Google, we have several great partners that we work with, but I primarily view them as providing me with access to expertise that I don't have or don't want to have, or providing me with elasticity that it wouldn't make sense for me to build in. But I'm not a big believer in labor arbitrage. We have a user help desk that we insourced a year ago, and not only have the CSAT numbers shot up, right, but the CSAT numbers have shot up, the cost to close a ticket, the time a ticket is open, mean time to repair, all these things have gone down. These kind of quality people, they keep all the technical documentation up to date. And to your point, we couldn't find these people, so it's a training program. We bring them on, we bring in promising people with a good with a good promising background. And they get 2 years of training as on-the-job training, and while they're contributing, they come out of it as IT professionals, who can go on to pursue other things at Google or elsewhere. But I think that more and more companies, I see more and more programs like this. We, the industry, have to go train the people ourselves.
I think that's a microcosm for what we're all going to be faced with large technology stacks.
And we've been hugely successful. I mean, it is these programs, we have some very talented people running them, but we've been hugely successful doing that. And I think we get great costs, we get great results that we couldn't get attempting to take the price arbitrage approach of taking common work and pushing this far away from the company as possible.
Before we move to Q&A, I'd like for each of you to sort of summarize the things that you think are most important to focus on in the next year and a half or so as going forward. What are the things that worry you? I mean, they may be different across the spectrum. I'll give you a little bit of time to answer that. But what's the thing that worries you the most? What's the thing that scares you about the risk of failure? I mean, the risk of not getting your agenda done. There are some obvious ones, customer satisfaction. I mean, getting underneath the covers of what's really bothering you in terms of your environment. And I would imagine there may be different answers because of the companies and the environments. Who wants to start?
I mean, there's a broad risk I see repeated, I'd say, in my company and more broadly in our industry that I'm not going to give you like one particular project that I'm scared is going to blow up and get me fired.
Yeah, no.
It would be unwise of me to do that. But I will say that I think that the software as a service trend is phenomenal and needs to be encouraged. We're big buyers of software as a service, but I see an increasing number of companies that don't have a data strategy, and they find that actually the DNA of their company is possessed in 100 or more service providers and not actually owned by them. And I think that these pose strategic risks. There's a bunch of great case studies about how the financial services industry in particular was severely hurt in following 2008 and so on, when they needed to analyze data differently from how they had previously, and they didn't have access to all the data that they needed. And
right.
I think that software as a service is the future of a big chunk of our industry, but I don't think we really have the practices nailed down for understanding what our core corporate data assets are and how we're going to manage them and how we're going to take advantage of software as a service providers without losing the ability to understand our companies on our own.
Good point.
I think that's well summarized. That's the fear with the cloud and stuff for me is you now need even more clever people. It's good that you can offload some of the non-strategic work to cloud providers and focus on core competencies. That's great, but it still comes to you need very clever people to manage that. And what if you have to bring it back and so that's one. The first question about what you really need a lot, as old-fashioned as it sounds, it's leadership. IT is evolving, so you now go into the guys who are coming on board, the people who are coming on board are smarter than me. Well, they were always smarter than me, but they're especially smarter than coming out of schools. How do you become a mentor-mentee? So it's not the typical boss, subordinate. So how do you manage them that you can actually learn from them? And so I'm trying to learn how to be a leader to my kids. It's not very easy. So you have to figure it out because I think the next generation is coming and they are smart.
I think you're right. The millennial phenomena is a big one for a lot of organizations that I talk to. Particularly when you start talking about innovation and how they're pushing, the democratization, the consumerization, they're pushing. They're not. And by the way, if you don't move fast enough,
They will.
they will run over you.
Yep.
Yeah, I think they push on the expectation side of technology. I also think that they, and there are a lot of millennials that are here as you look across the landscape. They don't work and act like we did. It is it's much more like the Borg in terms of a collective nature in which they do work, which is incredibly, incredibly powerful. There's only one thing that keeps me up at night, and that is getting the right people to the right tasks and just giving them the power and the tools that they need to be successful. Because there aren't any huge bets anymore in the way that we do our IT. We're just not betting the farm on anything. I think even the cloud strategy, small failure, you have the ability to fall back and regroup. You don't have the talent, you don't have anything. And that is the only natural resource that's going to differentiate any single company. It's the reason we're in California. It's the reason we're in Bentonville. We're in Mexico. We're in 27 different places. But it's that really smart people want to bring their really smart ideas to places where they make a difference. It's going to be talent.
No, I think it's certainly not the dollars, but it's the incredible demand that's coming at a very rapid pace, and having, as you said, the data strategies and the reference architectures to stay ahead of the various mobilization efforts and such. And also, as I mentioned earlier, the change management, the business keeping up with this rapid change and really acclimating and driving it so that you do get the benefit to the bottom line and to our customers.
Thank you. Let's shift to some Q&A. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate the dialogue.
My name is Bob Bram with EMC. You touched on a topic early in the conversation I'd like to ask you to expand upon, and that is your changing relationship with business partners. So we talked a little bit about the budget and getting money for projects that create revenue or collaboration, and certainly IT has changed from being a cost center and a services organization to, in many ways, thought leadership. We've all been hearing about that for the last 10 to 15 years. But more recently, can you share with us how your relationship with your business partners within the company is changing?
I had an interesting statistic, and that was we had as much turnover in IT into the business as we did externally 2 years in a row. And so I'd like to have this really great, wonderful plan that we've been exporting our technical talent to the business. But the reality is that the business has really figured out that they need to embrace and harness and understand it. And I think the more that this trend happens, probably most of us have spent a stint in the business and back and forth. I think that's the biggest change that we've seen is it's no longer an uninformed business partner, but it really is a business partner who may not understand all the complexities of what we're trying to do, but there isn't a just go do it, here's an order writing. It hasn't been that way, I think, for a long time in retail. I haven't been there very long, but I find that it's a much more intelligent conversation that takes place, and one that is not unreasonable anymore.
Now, one thing that we did is put a framework together between IT and the business that rated the partnership on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being shadow IT and reactive, 5 being innovative and at the table and at the strategic sessions. And 1-to-1 between the IT person and the business person, whether it's a director or VP level, they sat down and agreed were they a 2 or a 3 or 4, and there was a definition of what that meant, and then we set a goal that everyone had to move up at least 1 level in 2012, so they can better understand IT and how to get the most out of IT, and it seems to be working well.
Yeah, we've taken a similar approach with grading. We do our annual planning with our stakeholders as a single process, right? So the IT budget in support of each business function is just part of their budget, and they get to make trade-offs. We help them make trade-offs about, that could be money that Google spends on a financial system or on financial professionals or doesn't spend at all, right? But it's all one thing, right? It's all a single planning process.
I'm still building credibility with the team. I've been here for a year, and you have to fight every day. So if you ask people now, how do you think about your IT, they probably say it sucks. But they hopefully they say it was better.
This is Silicon Valley. They
Silicon
always
Valley.
say
Exactly.
So I don't have any illusions about what they're saying about me. I'm not going to do a poll because I know what they'll say. Hopefully they'll say it's better. But they invite me to go to a lot of the customers now to sales calls. They invite me to a lot of partnership with companies like Google or EMC, and I can get included in a lot of, before they buy a company, they want to talk to me to see, what do you think? And before the marketing guys goes and meets these CIOs, they at least ask me and say, what do you think they'll be looking at before they go blindly in? So I take it, I don't want a lot of pats on my back, but we'll take what you can get.
Next question, in the back.
My name is Naeem Zafar from Bitzer Mobile. Question about enterprise mobility for each of the CIOs. You hear a lot about bring your own device, BYOD. In your agenda, where does that rank in the next 12 months? Are you deploying BYOD? Are you looking at it? Or this is too deep issue to worry about?
So I'm a big non-believer in BYOD for personal computers. I think that getting back to the issue of security, I think in terms for security and supportability, I think it's a chimera, and I think it's going to lead to trouble. Someone's really got a problem with their computer. The fact that they bought it themselves is not going to stop your people from being on the line for having to help them, number one. Number two, I think that the threat landscape is such that I think that BYOD is risky, and I think that saying there's a class of personal computer problems you can disinvest from as a CIO is, I think, a big mistake. On the smartphone front, I think it's a very different story. I think that there's actually pretty good tools that we have for managing and enforcing our enterprise policies on our employees' devices, and we're big believers in that. We have a hybrid corporate liability or personal liability program, depending on what the employee wants to do and what the manager wants to support. But I think that BYOD for the smartphone is definitely something you can make work, and every BYOD is one less carrier contract I have to manage. That's a nice thing. But I am a big non-believer in big BYOD for the laptop.
Pretty much the same at PG&E. We are not doing the laptop, but we have enabled this, bring your own smartphone or enable email on your smart device.
Yeah, I think BYOD, if you're going to have less secure devices, then you're going to have to look at virtualization of desktops and those types of things. And depending on the trade-off on costs, when you're a EDLC, what you want is for people to bring their own device, for them to bring their own service, for them to have their own expectation, change it out all the time, and just provide them a portal back through. I don't think that we're as far along on that as we want to be, but so far so good on security. I mean, you know what? BYOD sounds really good, sort of like BYOB. It sounds good until you realize somebody else's B is a little bit better than yours. And you know which B I'm talking about.
And you're responsible for that B.
Yeah.
It is, and I think that I don't think that we know exactly what that's going to look like, but millennials are changing the complete game. The whole concept that you're going to stay out in front of some 27-year-old. I have a 21-year-old. I can just, barely see him. He's a blur as he crosses in front of me as a technology, change agent. I think they are going to continue to push in the enterprises, and the more that they start to green our enterprises, the more that they become young and make we're just not going to be able to enforce rules.
I actually think it's possible. I mean, I think that the challenge becomes different, but I mean, when it comes to personal technology, my organization's goal is to delight our users with the technology we provide and to let them, give them as much as it's safe, to give them the choice and the tool set that they'll use to be productive.
And do you allow heterogeneous, or is it
so we
all
provide,
Android all the time?
We provide customer support. So if you want to bring an iPhone to work that you've paid for yourself on a plan you're paying for yourself, you've got to allow us manage it to manage it so that we can control the data and so on. But if you want to do that, you can do that. And if you want a Windows PC, you get a Windows PC. If you want a Mac, you get a Mac. If you want Linux, you get Linux.
Yeah.
So Ben is making us look very smart. We have a BYOD policy, but we tried to debate it several times. And we have your policy, and I couldn't explain why. But the phones you can bring, pretty much there are two kinds of phones people bring in, but you can bring any phone you want. And we have good tools, both internal and external, to manage that. So that's not a worry. And I can tell you 12 months before in the other company, I did not have BYOD. I had standards, and now I have a BYOD. and life is a lot better. Don't deal with this phone doesn't work with this software, whatever. You bought it in Best Buy or Apple or Google, you go fix it. So it is a much better world for CIO, and it's cost effective. On the PC, what we interesting on the desktop we found is, interestingly, people are not saying, I want this version of Microsoft Windows on this particular PC or another one. They're not saying I want a Samsung, Dell, or Lenovo. They say they want Macs. And we had a policy of, that's what they say, they want Macs along with PCs. And we had a don't ask, don't tell policy on Macs. So now, officially, we say, if you want a Mac, we'll give you a Mac, for God's sake. So we officially bless it and support it, but we pay for it.
Yeah.
Bless is,
Right.
not really.
Right.
Next question.
Right.
I'm sorry, Bask, we get it.
No, she just asked, do you pay for it? Yeah, it's like Google.
Yeah.
We pay for it. We come into work, we give you two choices, or you want a Windows PC, we give you. If you want Apple, we'll give you. And we like both of them, and we support them, and the cost is not that expensive to do.
Okay, we're way over here in the corner. Hello. Hi, I'm Chris Primesberger with eWeek. I would like you to address the quality of data, okay? We can't make good business decisions unless the data we have is good for our businesses. And we're getting so much data right now, it's hard for us to keep control of it. That's another key word. Could each of you describe to me, or define to me, what you see as quality data? And also, are you satisfied with the quality of data in your systems right now? You're information people, so I want to hear about information and data. Can you define that for me and explain to me if you're satisfied with the quality of your information now, and if you had advice for others on how to keep quality in their data stores?
I'm going to go back to
Let me start.
Walmart seems to be doing okay.
Well, you know what? Walmart has a culture of data, right? So the culture of the company, I always tell this funny story. I was with the company like 2 weeks or something like that, and I walked into a big officers meeting, and the CEO was asking the head of the West Division what the cost of bananas going from the price of 50 cents to 54 cents a pound was doing to sales in northern Phoenix. And I thought, wow, okay, and he knew. Because the level of information that's used and the granularity to make decisions dynamically drives the company. Everybody needs that level of data. And I honestly think that is what drives the quality of data, not CIOs. Yeah. I think that there's an expectation at the business of the availability of the information, the currency of the information, and the accuracy. And I think that it's there. I'll tell you where I think the broader issues will come in, at least for Walmart, are perhaps in data sources which we don't own. As we look at big data and the mashup of those data sources to provide value, that may be a completely different challenge. But the quality of data that you have about your customer and about your product, I think all comes down to what the expectation is of the business that you run. And that's why it's good at Walmart.
I think we have strong customer data. The biggest challenge in the utility, especially for PG&E, is the infrastructure data. So the information about the pipes. We have a lot of that data. I'm sorry to say some of it is actually on paper and not digitized. And that is digitized is not set up in a geospatial information system or GIS system. So that for this mile of pipe, you have every attribute, and it's all accurate and interrelated so that you can do a maximal allowable operating pressure test on it, or MAOP. So there's a huge effort underway for us to cleanse that data, digitize it, and create it in a geospatial format to be able to do those complex calculations for safety.
I mean, our business is run off data. We take our user data and the data that we use to generate our businesses incredibly seriously and operate and run them at world-class levels. I think that, so not commenting on kind of the area of Google products or where people who use Google properties come in, I think that I'll go back to what I said earlier about the big challenge, which is I think where companies take corporate functions and send them to service providers, they need to think carefully about how they govern and steward that data and it becomes an external source. To Karenann's point, it becomes an external source of data, and you have to think about how you're managing and dealing with that. I think that that's a challenge for everyone who's using software as a service to send data enrichment somehow to people off-site or another company.
I wouldn't say we're doing a good job on the data, to be honest. I wouldn't know the cost of banana in Phoenix. I wouldn't know the cost of banana next door. But I think we have a long ways to go. It's a master data management issue. And one thing Karenann told was very important is, in any company, if you pay people bonuses or promotions in June, July, the data is going to be very clean in end of June. You know who reports to whom, their levels, what they get paid, and all the stuff. And then once the bonus is declared, the data becomes bad and gets progressively worse because you don't use it, right? So it is the end users have to take accountability. If they use it every day, if somebody's checking the price of banana every day, guarantee the data would be up. So we haven't figured out how to, we can go do a project and get master data cleaned up and get the data all sorted out, then put the process in place for people to maintain it. We haven't figured it out yet.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Rahul and I handle IT sourcing at Expansion. My question to all of you is, how open or closed are you becoming in adopting emerging and new technologies created by startups in your organizations? Thank you.
Talent. I look at the acquisition that Wal-Mart Labs made around looking at startups. Some of them actually joined us as part of our M&A and doing things. So I think what might have traditionally been a more cautious approach to startups now is a lot more open. And it's not because innovation in startups is that much better than in the company necessarily. It's that it's different. It's faster. It's looking for pillar customers in order to refine their business models. And I think that over time there are more and more entrepreneurs. The leader of our mobile organization worldwide is a former entrepreneur from a startup. And we acquired Cosmix, a very small, a small startup organization. So I think it just changes companies over time. It's changed Walmart an awful lot in terms of what we can expect and how we deal with smaller organizations, especially here in the Valley.
Yeah, from a PG&E perspective, we are very interested. In fact, we just participated with the Department of Energy on an apps challenge for that green button data, and I think there were over 50 small companies, some of them individuals in their garage, developing solutions that leverage that data to help our customers be more efficient with their energy usage.
So we're certainly open to, well, Google buys a lot of small companies. But certainly open to working with companies when it comes to kind of the IT agenda. We have a pretty big build over buy bias, which is pretty well known in this community, and we're a tough sell. If you're short on funds, I would not advise you to waste a significant amount of them trying to sell to me, unless you're really, really confident. But it's a gamble because we're a tough sell. But we definitely believe in startups, open to them, and we've done some great things with small companies.
Well, we are a startup still. That's how we look at, that's what keeps it exciting. So we definitely don't forget our roots. But the difference is, what I hear is we are a company in cloud, mobile, social networking, security, whatever. That's the first sentence you hear. That doesn't really excite. I mean, that's putting all the buzzwords together. So it becomes very difficult for us to go through the noise and find those nuggets. And we spend some time looking at it. We're certainly curious. We'll look at it. But it is very noisy to really differentiate. And so when I hear all those buzzwords, I kind of turn off right away.
Yes.
I'm Joe Schwartz from Cisco, and I've got a question for the panelists about collaboration technologies like video conferencing, web conferencing, and enterprise social software. I'm curious on your perspectives, and is it strategic? Is it something you initiate or lines of business initiate?
It's actually a combination, and one of the ways that we're justifying it is we have a lot of people on the road who are servicing, 70,000 square miles of California, and we've proven that we can reduce our incidents of motor vehicle incidents by getting people off the road and leveraging video conferencing and actually justify it through those savings.
So it's huge for us. Obviously, we make a number of collaborative and social products, right? So it's kind of part of the business, and we dog food and use all that stuff internally. We're an enormous video conferencing shop. We've built our own video conferencing system. It runs on top of the same infrastructure as Google Hangouts, but we built it ourselves. We have over 6,000 video conferencing endpoints in the company. I have been told, although I cannot confirm it, that we are the largest civilian user of video conferencing in the world. We certainly crank out an enormous number of video conferencing minutes across laptops and custom-built video conferencing devices, like I said, of which we have over 6,000, and we add dozens more every day.
Well, I certainly pushed video conferencing collaboration hard as an initiative, and not because we didn't have it in Juniper. We had every collaboration software possible. And then it becomes like a Tower of Babel. You don't know who's on what collaboration tool, how do you communicate? So it becomes, here's where traditional IT comes in pretty handy, is you need to have a way of collaborating to people, and you need consistency. And certainly Google has a fantastic product and so on. So we're now rolling out a standard collaborative environment. And I looked at it, I'm giddy with how exciting it is to just, you have seen on consumerization how you do videos with your kids and everybody else on Hangouts. I love that. You need to have those in the enterprise. You just need it. Your innovation doubles and improves. But what you need to do is, we need to know how to do it. You can't give them 8 choices and say, try me on. Maybe the millennials would get it fine because they are used to being on Skype, Google, and every other competition, and they still handle it fine. But the older people like me would like to have a standard way of collaborating with folks.
And I still, we have hundreds of remote associates in IT. And what I find is that when we're forced to be as an enterprise CIO, the single point integrator of the collaborative portfolio, it's a lot less effective than when you can get just a suite of collaboration that is, just killer one touch. And probably Walmart isn't at the leading edge of that level of collaboration. We have a founder culture which is very meet and be together. It's why we have so many people in Bentonville. It's why we have large centers across the world. I think it's part of the secret sauce of Walmart, I guess is what I'm saying. So probably less so than a lot of other places. Not that will be the way that it is forever, but I think that's the reality today.
Next question.
Ralph Lauder with the Clorox Company. So an observation and a question. So the observation is, you guys have talked about consumerization and BYO. The observation I've had is in my 20 years of IT history, I've never had a user come to me and say, please, can I spend $2,000 of my own money to go buy some technology I need at work, right? So for us, it's not an accounting problem. And you guys, I think, nailed it, which is it's about flexibility and self-service. So what people are really looking for is, I want IT to get out of my way, and I want to use the tools I want to do for the job I want to do. So that's how we look at BYO. But my question is kind of a little bit on collaboration. So more and more of these collaborative technologies we're seeing are collaborating in the cloud, in and outside of our companies, in our supply chain, in our retail partners, our consumer set, et cetera. So not to kind of put old school IT, an old school IT question in our conversation about the future of IT, but how do you guys look at things like, I don't know, e-discovery, we've mentioned regulatory compliance. How are we dealing with some of the realities of IT when more and more of our internal users are making choices that we're often unaware of to do things like subscribe to a box or a Dropbox, to begin to share information and collaborate with people in and outside the company in different ways? So how do you get in front of that problem?
Ralph knows the answer. And he's done this for a while, so he knows the answer, but he's just tricking us, so be careful.
You go first then.
Okay.
Yeah, you're going first.
Hey, let me try this and let me know if I'm wrong. So I think the way I look at it is, first of all, you got to get ahead of it. I mean, if you find a solution to do the Dropbox, that you pick whatever is right for the company and give that solution, which is easier than what they can find on the consumer, or at least as good at it, you got a better chance of telling people, hey, this is the standard. You can't say, we can't match the consumer, so I'll give you an ugly way of storing this file. It's going to take 4 hours, which is what kind of IT traditionally does. So our challenge is it has to be as cool, as easy, and secure, and so that becomes the easiest way for people to kind of do it rather than the other way. That's one way of thinking. Easier said than done. There's not a lot of technology that does that well. And the second thing, so if you can't beat them, join them, kind of a thing we do. But I think certain things you have to put your foot down. It's not free for all. I mean, we all come to work for a reason, and it is fun, but it's also, there's some norms that you do. So I think certain things the traditional IT has to come back and say this is what you do, like the PCs, and there are several standards. Now, if you get the leadership behind it, which is what you should do, then it's easier. People come back and say, so you don't have to fight the battle. Your COO or CEO and CFO and other guys fight it for you. Right?
In many ways, probably we need to think about being fast followers. In security, there's no way to be 100% secure. What you can only hope is that you catch 100% of every bad guy that gets inside, so that they don't ripple around and do a lot of damage. And maybe in a lot of these type of creative ways that folks either get around the controls that you have, the best that you can hope for is actually to follow them there and then fast follow, not to close the holes behind them, but just to give them the tools that they need. I think it's not possible to stay out in front of the most creative end user that you've got on absolutely everything. And the best that you can hope for is just, the pride of ownership that they have of Yahoo, I beat you on this one, that you find it and you just follow them. And I think
she meant
that's
Yahoo as an expression.
Yeah, Yahoo, not Yahoo. Is that my Canadian accent showing? Yahoo.
I can sense you clenching your fist there. So.
No. I mean, Ralph, I think part of the answer is that we have to respect our users and help them understand the risks and share in the answer as well. And the problem begins the minute we make the assumption that they're children that we need to build guardrails around. And if you treat them with respect, realize we're all here to solve problems. If they're doing these things, they're doing them to solve work problems. They're doing them because of why they came to work, not in spite of it. Be open, share with them kind of what the risks are and why they shouldn't be why they shouldn't do them. Don't be unreasonable to them. Respect the fact that they're probably choosing to work in a way because it's the most efficient way for them to work. You can work it from there, right? But it starts with respect.
We've had quite a bit of luck with our DLP, our data loss prevention tool, catching these things and finding those individuals and just sitting down with them and showing them the right way to do it, and they've been quite responsive. And then just continuing to configure that tool to get smarter and smarter about detecting the more creative users.
Next question in the back.
Hi, my name is Angela Chen. I'm at Vantage Data Centers. Thanks so much for taking my question. So I was wondering, what changes you guys see as you think about capacity planning for your data center needs over the next several years?
I have an easy answer. I'm just a customer of Google's production data centers. I've moved my problem to the cloud, and I don't worry about that anymore.
I'm kind of expecting him and this company and other companies like that to solve the problem for me. So I don't think about it either. Because there are opportunities now where other guys are giving you this elastic demand. I mean, it's really happening now. It's not just a buzzword. So, I mean, we do think a lot about collapsing our own internal data centers, what we keep in private cloud and what we put in public cloud, and which applications goes to the cloud. That's the more planning that we do than building massive data centers, on demand.
And I think when you look at capacity, whether you're looking at you know, a converged infrastructure and that's the way we're going to do capacity planning in these big pods and chunks over time. The reality is that there's still a lot of dedicated data center space that's just not going to the cloud unless we stop doing innovative work and start virtualizing all of our existing legacy. I think so. There's a whole portion of capacity planning that has looked historically, except for storage. Don't think about storage. It's going to be, you know, 50 times bigger in the next 10 years. But when you look at the compute, it's you know, probably history is at least an indicator of what the future is. But I think storage and what's going to happen there, and how we will think about storage and how we will think about the use of information and data is going to be completely different. And I think a lot of compute that we may keep is going to, in the big data world, be about trying to bring the compute to the big data instead of bringing the data into the compute. And that's going to be a huge change vector for data centers, is how and what you do with the compute component is going to be different. It's not going to be so much around the capacity.
I don't really have anything to add. From a regulated utility perspective, we need to solve the cloud, whether it's hybrid or community or some other type of solution for our data growth.
I think we have time for one more.
Good. Last question. John Holton with Symphony Consulting. So you talked about the consumerization or consumers driving change, and consumers can be fickle, and that means lots of different changes coming towards you. Also the speed, I think you talked about the speed of change. How do you balance that with disciplined change management